Christian orthodoxy. In a day and age when there was a time in Christian history when the apostles decided what's orthodox and what's not. It's called the apostolic era.
So what does that mean? Orthodox?
That means orthodoxy, like if you think that Christianity is a bounded set,
okay,
and there's certain beliefs that are inside and there's certain beliefs that are outside, somebody determines who's outside and who's inside. It's actually a group of people get to determine this. There's what's called, in Christian history, there's called the apostolic era. And we read about it in the book of Acts, and we read about it in some very early Christian literature. The apostles, those guys who followed Jesus around and were the disciples, and then they were renamed the apostles, which meant they were the sent ones. They decided some of this stuff. For instance, the first ever council of church leaders was held in Jerusalem, and it's recorded in the book of Acts in the New Testament. And then we had the patristic period. That patristic means fathers, and that's where we had church fathers and people debating, theologians debating it. And they would write articles and treatises for and against. And then we had the conciliar period, which meant church councils got together, and this is by the time there are layers of bureaucracy in the Christian church.
So you're just kind of like showing off your, doctor theology.
Yeah, exactly.
Right now.
Hey, it's got to be worth something, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So then all the bishops would get called together. They would debate an issue and they would take a vote. And there were councils like the two most famous are the Council of Nicaea and the Council of Chalcedon. And they did, like at the Council of Chalcedon, they determined who was Jesus. Was he God? Was he human? Was he a combination? They debated it.
You kind of have like a gleam in your eye when you're talking about this.
Then they took a vote.
You're totally in the zone.
But here's what happened. The church, there was a major split in the year 1054 called the Great Schism, or the Great Tearing. The Eastern Church split off from the Western Church. And then 500 years later, we get Martin Luther and John Calvin and the Mennonites and Ulrich Zwingli, and you go and Henry VIII, and suddenly everyone's splitting from everybody else. There's no more ability to call a church council to have any kind of consensus on any issue. And ever since then, really, it's been a free-for-all. It's been up for grabs. So who's right about the very heart of the gospel? John Wesley, Martin Luther, John Calvin, Ulrich Zwingli, or Menno Simons. Like here we are in the 16th century, we've got 5 major voices competing for what's really the heart of the Christian message. And you know what? There's been no consensus. So what I find, what irks me and what I struggle with is when people make statements, be they on Twitter or in a sermon or in a book, in which they claim to have some kind of authoritative sense of what is true, what is accurate, and what is at the heart of the gospel, to the exclusion of the many other versions and varieties of Christianity that are available to people today. And I would much rather have church leaders, Christian leaders, say, there's lots to choose from. The best thing you can do is be better educated. And one way for people to do that is to show up tomorrow night at Wayzata Community Church and hear Rob Bell for themselves, as opposed to taking their pastor's perspective on what is orthodox.
That's deep stuff, man. Well, hey, we're going to be back in a few minutes with Michael Horton on AM 950, the voice of Minnesota, the Doug Pagitt Radio Show.
Okay. Read exactly what's on the cue cards.
That's just good radio.
Hi there, Matt McNeil from the Matt McNeil Show, weeknights at 6 p.m.